Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm your host, Scott Bishop. I'm pleased to present the second half of our conversation with Maggi Peirce. In part one, Maggi spoke in great depth about her 20 years running Tryworks Coffeehouse in New Bedford. In part two, she discusses the end of her time at Tryworks, the Bedford Folk Festival at SMU, and the unexpected way in which she started her career as a storyteller. Let's pick up where we left off. I just want to say I was really moved when you talked about, that young man telling you years later that by that third visit he got, that you loved everyone there, that you loved him. Yeah. Because that love comes out of commitment and creating a safe space. It also comes out of the boundaries you set. If you care about somebody's safety and well-being, you create a safe space, you give them freedom, and you give them boundaries. And all those things are an expression of love.
Absolutely. That is right. But you see, you don't really know this. When you start up, you don't know whether American children will be different from what we were. And that's going back like a whole generation. Yep. You're not too sure, because at that time, Scott, in the 60s and 70s, the saying was, trust nobody over 30.
Right, yes.
And I was over 30. Mm-hmm. But they believed in me. And of course, around about 16 years there, I started to throw out a fishing line, trying to get someone to run Tryworks who was a Trywork person. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to even hear the suggestion. And I said to a couple of them, it's very difficult for me because I'm becoming really well known. And at a Bedford one year, this was what happened. And here again, Kenny Goldstein was helping Howard Glasser, who was running it, of course, but he was helping him and asked that he was trying a new thing. That in his folk, because he was a folklorist, he was bringing a new thing to folk festivals. And he more than likely had brought it to the Pennsylvania Festival, which was renowned. He said to Howard, I want to run a workshop. Well, workshops were all known, and very often you had somebody really important asking questions at your little group, and there are maybe 3 or 6 people on stage, and a folklorist will ask something to all of you, and you will all answer.
Like you have a panel of guests.
And you have a panel, that sort of thing. And what he was going to do, which we didn't know about at all, he was bringing 3 people whom he knew would know stories, and he had spoken to them all. There was Owen McBride from the south of Ireland. There was Norman Kennedy from Aberdeen, Scotland, still alive, still my friend. Wow. And there was also a lovely man called Benny, and he was the most magnificent singer, and he was from Maine. But he was reputed to be a good storyteller. And he met with an accident on the way to the festival at the Bedford. He met with an accident. Not badly, but the car was broken. And he got word to the festival that he couldn't take part. And I happened to be working at the festival, and I had been taking part in a ballad section, which I was never keen on because I knew very few ballads. But I was coming away from there when Kenny Goldstein, this man who had started me writing my book, Keep the Kettle Boiling, caught up with me and he said, Maggie, do you know any stories? And I said, huh? He said, Benny is not arriving. He's had an accident. I'm trying to run a 2-hour talk on storytelling. I've got Owen McBride and I've got Norman Kennedy. And he said, I don't have Benny any longer. It's a 2-hour workshop. Who the hell will I get to talk? He said, do you know any kind of stories? And I said, oh no, I don't know any stories. I said, oh no, I don't. I don't know. Like what kind of stories? He said, well, you know, the Irish stories, the myths and the like. And I said, oh no, I don't know any myths. Oh no. And then luckily he said to me, well, like, do you have any family stories? And I said, oh, family stories. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure I could think of a couple of, like, ghost stories. And he said, yeah, do you know any ghost stories? And I said, well, yes, I do. Yes, all right. So at any rate, I went back with them because I was going off to have lunch or something at that time. I said, yeah, I'm free. I'm free for the next 2 hours. And he said, oh my God, that's great. Okay, come on back with me. It starts at such and such a time. And I sat down with Norman, whom I knew, but I didn't know Owen at that time. I'd heard of him, but I didn't know him. So at any rate, we were all talking. And of course, Kenny was a great folklorist, and he would pin us by asking us something that, of course, made us think, made us told from our backgrounds, you see. And we all told stories, and it was great. It was fun. It was great fun. And I told my couple of ghost stories that I'd thought of, and then Kenny said to the three of us, he said, now, do you feel that stories really only should be collected from people who got them from their grandparents, or could you be a storyteller just by being a good yarn spinner? And Norman said, no, I feel that you should really have got the stories, you know, from maybe one of the travelling people or the like. And Owen McBride said, well, I mean, the stories that I told and that Maggie have told, that they were family stories. He said, no, I think it should be, you know, from somebody older. And I said, oh, no, I don't agree with you at all, I say, because this is me. That's me. That's the way I think. And I said, I knew people that could stop you in the street, and it wasn't a joke that they were telling you, but what they were telling you about something was absolutely mesmerizing. I said, and they would spin the yarn to you, and you would leave them having stood for 15 minutes hearing about how they had gone down the pipes to work something in the sewers of Belfast, and you were fascinated by it. It was so interesting because they had the gift of the gab. I said, that's what the gift of the gab is. I said, and something could have happened last week, and suddenly, now this was taking place outside on the steps of SMU. You know what SMU was like? And there were at least 200 people out in front listening to this new idea. And there was dead silence. And Kenny said, okay, Maggie, what happened to you last week? And everybody laughed. Because I'd been caught. Mm-hmm. And I looked at Kenny and I said, nothing happened to me last week. But a strange thing did happen to me the week before. And I told that story, and believe me, if I'm sitting here, I only told it one more time in my whole life. Of course, I know what it was about, but I wouldn't even try to tell it now. But it had to do with looking for a book forever, and it was about India. It was about looking for a book that I had read on a rainy holiday in Ballywhiskin, County Antrim. And we were all stuck inside because you didn't go out on the sands, because the house that we all lived in, the whole clan of the Walkers went down to Ballywhiskin every summer. And we couldn't do, so we either played cards with Uncle Nelson or we read or mooched about the house, because we weren't allowed on the beach because it was bucketing with rain. And I read this wonderful book written by an Englishman who was working, of course, for the British in India. And he collected all sorts of things, but particularly ants and ant hills. And as a 12-year-old, I was fascinated by this wonderful book and searched for it for the rest of my life. And the week before, I got it.
Oh, wow.
From an antique book dealer. That was the core of it. But there was the flesh then that I covered that with. And I ended it with a biblical saying of, "Seek and ye shall find." You see, a biblical saying. And when it was finished, I got a standing ovation. Now, that was the first time that I'd ever told a story right off the top of my head. But it really happened. And he, Kenny Goldstein, then pointed out to them what I had done. And he said, "This is truly oral tradition. This is typical oral tradition." And that's what I meant about the man meeting you and talking 15 minutes about the pipes under the city. That's what you have, or you don't. And when I started to tell stories then, and then had, of course, to look for more, I found my particular storyteller whose work I adored, and I wrote to him, and he had collected as one of these storyteller collectors of the North, but he didn't collect any of the mystic stories. He collected folk tales. And that's what I always said to people. I tell folk tales. And I wrote to him and I say, I will be telling them in my own speech. And it will be Belfast and Do You Mind, because he was from Fermanagh, County Fermanagh and Armagh. And he wrote back and said, not a bit, and be delighted. And so I always told his. And I told his stories at the Smithsonian and you name it. I travelled all over America. Not really south. I was never in Alabama or Mississippi. But down to South Carolina, over to Tennessee. And it was at one of the Stedfords that two of the storytellers from Tennessee came up and heard me. And then it was when I was trying to learn German script writing was terribly difficult. In Bethlehem, PA, I got a phone call, and it was from Tennessee. And that's where I made the connection with storytelling festivals, because I didn't even know they existed. I didn't even know that they existed. And these two girls I said, where did you get my name? And they said, well, it was Barbara and her cousin. Don't you remember that you met them at the Bedford in Massachusetts? And I said, oh, yes, of course. They were great storytellers. And they had gone back and told Jimmy Neil Smith, who was the head of Jonesboro National Storytelling. But I was there in the 2003, 3, 4, 5, I think, 2003, and then 5 and 6. I think that was it. I was actually the artist in residence in Tennessee, where you stay a full week and you not only speak at the hall in Jonesboro that runs, I think, almost for the year. That's how big it is. But they also send you to schools and universities and colleges in the area of Tennessee.
As part of your residency?
That was part of your residency. And you were well paid. But of course the thing is that they did so much. I was asked there quite a lot. But then you see, they ran out of folklore, particularly because then the person who had wonderful stories to tell about themselves or about being a cowboy, you know. I mean, I met one of the great cowboy storytellers and there. So we all got to know one another, and that too was wonderful. It was like, you know, there's nobody like a folkie, dear. Really, there's nobody like a folkie. I don't know what I would have done in America without folkies, because they're my kind of people.
They're your people, yeah.
You know, and they were wonderful, and I felt accepted by them, and also loved them.
What did you love about them? What connected for you?
When I first came here, I found it terribly difficult to speak to Americans. It was as if I were speaking. Of course, it might have been my accent. Of course, it might have been. Maybe people found it difficult to understand what I was saying. I got on very well with the people in church, extremely well, I must admit. But trying to speak to people, for example, I remember once, I never could find what to talk about. I'm not a talker about people. I'm not a gossip. And I remember once that someone said, this is so-and-so, she's studying English literature. So I immediately tried to talk to her about English literature, but she only knew what she was studying. Do you understand? Yeah. She really hadn't read English literature. I mean, I will be quite honest. When I came here, I had read about 3 American writers. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that was about all at that time.
Because you were reading books from your country, from England, and you get here and like you don't have the familiarity.
Exactly.
So you don't have the common ground to talk with.
But here, you see, here I not only read American writers, but I also read Mexican and Brazilian because of living in America. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Not just the United States of America, but the Americas.
The Americas.
Both continents.
Exactly, yeah. And I discovered that even at university, you find that people had studied certain subjects, but they were merely studying that subject so that they could become like the professor.
Because it's basically like everybody trains to be a specialist like the person that's training.
Exactly.
And then you have no expansion. You don't have a broader conversation with people.
No, I've just finished a really interesting book written by a Southern Irish man, though Protestant, very out of the ordinary. You know, there's only about 1% of the Protestants left in the south of Ireland.
I didn't know that.
Now. Oh, it used to be only 2%. That's why we had trouble in the north, because we were very 48-52. Do you understand?
Yeah, it was a pretty even split between Catholics and Protestants.
Yeah, and it was all true. And people, when I came here, some people were quite nasty to me, and sometimes even in the folk world, because I was Northern Irish.
Yeah.
And when I would say to people, hey, a lot of us, were there from the time of Elizabeth, they were stunned. They didn't know.
Wow.
Do you
Didn't know the history.
understand?
Yeah, I do.
You see?
Like, people didn't understand,
They didn't
your
understand.
history,
No.
how long
No.
people have been in the north.
No, and I would say to them, I was in the city, but I was always interested in the language. And I said, when I got the book by Miss Hogg of to do with words apart.
May I see?
I have so many of those words with a tick beside them because we used them.
Yeah.
And I was a city girl. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. City's got different language than country.
Absolutely. And of course they're Scottish, you understand.
Yes.
So a lot of Middle English as well. Yeah. And Shakespearean. Yeah. Oh yes. We understand, and still in use in country places. But when I was a kid working at the age of 14, I heard it from the girls in the workroom. I was in the office, but I heard them and I knew their words, and my mother used words like that because her father was from the country. They say that in Belfast we have soil in our fingernails because we're only one generation from the soil. That was what they said when I was young. They don't say that, I'm sure now, but they did when I was young, I mean, I knew so much about language without ever realizing it. And then, of course...
Osmosis again.
And then we went to Killinchy in County Down when I was 9. Because of the war, I was evacuated. We were all evacuated. My 2 cousins, my Auntie Aileen and my mother and Dorothy and my sister and I. And we were sent to Killinchy. And I picked up all sorts of words that weren't used in the city.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And years later... Oh, this is interesting. Now, this is just a yarn from my life, but it's true. When I was in Edinburgh, when I was in Scotland, I had lived in Holland, and one of the men in the University of Edinburgh was Dutch, and his sister was coming over. And he came to me because he knew that I spoke some Dutch because I had lived in Amsterdam. And he said, my sister's coming over. Would you mind taking care of her because she speaks very little English? And I said, oh, sure. So then we became friendly that way. And she left and went home, having had a nice time in Edinburgh. And she was a lovely wee girl. And the brother came to me one day and he said, would you say that you always talk about Belfast, would you say that you're from Belfast? And I said, oh yes, I'm absolutely Belfast. I said, I guess if you're looking for class, I guess I would be low middle class, but low middle class. I said, my sister would have said, no, working class. Because my father was a policeman, was in the Royal Navy before that. But I think we were definitely on the ladder upwards. I mean, I've got architects and headmasters in my immediate family. My cousins were all like that. And he said to me, I wouldn't say you had a Belfast accent. And I looked at him and I said, what would you know? And he said, Maggie, he said, I'm a linguist, scholar. He said, I would say, and he told me where he could hear accent and words that came from, believe it or not, near to Killinchy, where I had been a child for a year. when I was evacuated. He said, I would say it would be, nearer to the law. I think he said the loch, but I'm not too sure. At any rate, he gave the place, and I said, Cumber, Colinchie, down that way. He said, yes, that's where. And I said, oh, come off it. I was only there for not quite a year. And he said, you still have it in your voice. You still have it in words that you use.
Did he know that you had lived there before he talked to you?
No, never.
Wow.
I didn't know him that well, except for his sister, because I knew Dutch. You see, you just don't know what you travel with, especially when you're young. I mean, there's no denying it. When people have trouble, you look back. You look way back. What happened when they were young? What happened?
Because that's the past.
Same, and it's the same with I presume language and with stories and expressions and things that your mother told you. And Dot says, Mom never told me that. My mother said to me one day when she was cutting haddock, she said, "Want to hear a wee story? You see that mark there? That was where Christ put his thumb. And there's a dip where haddock was. I think it was near to the head, but I won't swear to it, but it was somewhere, because I was young. You see, and you remember. But she never told Dot that. Mommy knew I was interested.
And she knew that Dot wasn't interested.
She wouldn't have even thought of telling Dot.
I can actually see that with my own kids. There are things I will share with one because I think they'll be interested.
That's right.
But not so much with another, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You speak to your kids as individuals because you know them better than anyone. And so, oh yeah, Maggie will love this.
Exactly.
Dot's not going to care.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be interested in this. And my father, you see, he would climb up the stairs and sing as he took me upstairs. I'm the wee Fillory man, a rummel and tumble and Tory man. I'll do all that ever I can to follow the wee Fillory man. I have a sister Mary Ann, she drinks her tea from a wee tin can. Up a bop and a clape a ham, I'm a good old working man. He would climb up the stairs singing that to me. But he didn't do that to Dot, you see, even though she knew it, because that was a very well-known street song when we were growing up.
But you know your kids, you know what interests them and what won't interest them, and you start playing to that.
I guess you do, without even thinking about it.
I mean, it could be just the one time, like, Dot was bored with Daddy singing or said something. It's like, oh, I guess she doesn't like the singing.
Oh, no, she was Daddy's favourite.
Yeah?
Yes, she was Daddy's favourite, and I was Mommy's favourite. And Dot and I used to say, aren't we lucky? We've both got, like, a parent that we're the favourite.
Yeah.
I'm Daddy's favourite, and you're Mommy's favourite. And that was absolutely understandable and more or less taken for granted and not upset about it at all.
Well, because that's also normal. It's also normal that one parent might relate to one kid a little more closely than you love them both, but you're drawn to one more than the other.
Absolutely.
And they're drawn to one more than the other as well. It goes both ways.
That's right, absolutely. And the mother is drawn to them, and you can't help it. You're drawn to a child, and more than likely, there's more than likely one child, if you have a big family, that you're not too keen on. You wonder where they came from. Because I came from two very large families. My mother, there were 7 and 8 in each family. 5 girls and 2 boys, and 5 boys and 2 girls, and the other one. We thought that was quite remarkable.
Oh my word.
And the Kerrs had come from Tyneside, my father's family, but half were born in Belfast. My father was totally Belfast. Uncle Archie was, Uncle Noble, Uncle Norman, 4 of them, but the other 3 were two girls and a boy. They were born in Scotland. So half of Daddy's family spoke Scottish. And my father sang Robbie Burns. He knew a lot of Robbie Burns songs, because a lot of Robbie Burns songs were set to music. People loved Robbie Burns in Scotland. They really do. He was the poet, you know. When Dot and I sang together, which we did when we first lived in Scotland, the university was just starting a folk song society. And we went home to our bedsitter, and there was a note from Hamish Henderson, a renowned folklorist from Scotland and a great friend of mine, whom we had known in Belfast when I was 16, I think, because he was a friend of Cecil Newman. They were all youth hostel people.
So when you went hiking, those are
when we
folks
went
you
hiking,
knew.
yes. But they were much older than we were. And Cecil and Hamish, who was over working for some government thing after the war, after the Second World War, he was working in Belfast, but he had a connection with Cecil Newman, who was one of the older group of the Youth Hostel Association. And that was how we met Hamish. And Hamish said that he would help our group, our folklore group, the German group, because he could teach us better German than Cecil could, because Cecil spoke Schwäbische, which is dialect, a very dialect German, and Hamish speaks Hochdeutsch beautifully, and did there. He learned it, of course, in Scotland, because he went to one of the best colleges. But we met them because they taught us German songs as well as German language in the German group of the Youth Hostel Association of Northern Ireland, which was called YANI, Y-H-A-N-I, Youth Hostel Association Northern Ireland. You see, there were all of these connections. We need connections. And I feel that we have lost connections in America completely. And so many people in the folk world have died. I hate to tell you, but they have. Or they're very, very old. I was always 10 years older than everybody else in the folk world, both in Scotland and here. I was always 10 years older. So maybe that was why people were so kind to me, because I was an old woman in comparison to them, because they were all 10 years younger than me, you know.
I think they recognized that you had something really amazing to offer.
Well, that's very kind of you, dear. But I didn't realize either, you know.
But it does seem like people knew, you know, and also I think about the fact you kind of got thrown into the breach at Stedford, you know, where they needed the story. Somebody's been in an accident. Can you tell a story? Any story?
Yeah, but isn't that remarkable that it happened? Because I have heard that time and time again of it happening to other people. And renowned singers, that they had to take the place in an opera, or they had to step in with the understudy who normally never has anything to do. And suddenly, the person who was doing, you know, the number one spot in the opera suddenly gets a sore throat, etc.
Right.
You know.
And suddenly, someone's there, and it changes the whole trajectory of their life.
That's right. The fact that there was that deadly silence, and then Kenny said, "So what happened to you last week?"
And what I love is, oh, nothing. But the week before, it's like, you know, just that moment of suspense of like, oh, she's got nothing. Oh, she's got something indeed.
You see? And it really happened.
Yeah.
You see, and I have the book.
But the thing is, it's not even the book. It's how you talked about the book. It's how you talked about the gift of gab. It's not the what so much as the how.
The how. Yes, absolutely.
I did have a question. I feel like it's probably the most obvious question I could ask, which is, how did a nice Belfast girl end up the south coast of Massachusetts?
It happened because I am a Unitarian. You see, when I was brought up very strictly, Scottish Presbyterian, it is very strict. I don't mean that it's like Plymouth Brethren, because that would be really awful. What happened at the age of 12? I had a lovely Sunday school teacher called Miss Sterling, and I asked her some questions that I didn't quite understand. Can't remember those questions now, but as a 12-year-old, there were some things in the Bible and some things that I had learned at Sunday school that didn't make sense to me. And Miss Sterling, who had always endeavoured to answer every question, couldn't answer them. And I went home and I told my mother and father, both of them Scottish Presbyterian, that I would like to try to find the answers to these questions, because the church that we went to never answered these questions. And they allowed me to go to every church I went to, including Catholic.
Wow.
Now, you see, I had open-minded parents.
Yeah.
And then within our own families, we did not have open-mindedness with some other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they allowed me to go, and I went to the Methodists, I went to the Baptists, I went to the Congregational, I went to the Church of England, I went to the Church of Ireland,
Yep.
and also to one Roman Catholic church. And then my friend Vera, by this time I was 14, because it had taken me from 12 to 14, and I still hadn't found the church that I liked. And then my friend Vera McKee said to me, well, I don't know, Margaret, but my parents go to a church, but it's on the other side of town. It's called Unitarian. Why don't you try that? So I trudged off to this other church on a Sunday, and the Reverend Dr. Agnew was the minister there, and he came from the country, and he got up in the pulpit, and he did not have one of these swanky ministerial voices. Oh, my dear Lord, no, he got up and he'd say, you know, I read a really interesting book the other day, and the hero in it, you all like heroes, don't you? And everybody in the pew would all nod their head, and he would say, well, he reminded me of St. Paul, and this is the reason. And he would give a wonderful sermon. And I came back, and I went back again. And every Sunday I went back to the Unitarians. And finally I said to my mother, I'm going to be a Unitarian. And my mother said, oh, darling, but you know, he doesn't believe in God, dear. I've heard of him. And I said, well, I don't care. He's the only minister that I like listening to. And I became a Unitarian. And wherever I happened to be, I worked in London, and I worked in Edinburgh. And wherever I was, I went to Unitarian Church. And when I was at the Unitarian Church, that was where I met Ken, who was introduced to me by the secretary of our Unitarian Church, who was a psychiatrist, and a very good friend of mine.
And where was this Unitarian Church?
It was at the foot of Edinburgh Rock. Literally.
Yeah.
It was called St. Mark's. We were married there 3 years later. So I met Ken there. And that's how I ended up in Massachusetts.
And he's from here originally?
He is from here originally, and he was born into Unitarianism. Not many are, you know. In our church, there were a few born into the church. But most we had Jews who had changed, and many Catholics who had changed, especially in the 80s. We had a flood of Catholics at that time. And I know more Jews, and more Jews of mine were friends, real honest to God friends. I loved them because they were so clever and they were so thoughtful. Howard was a real friend of mine, a real friend. And I met him first of all in Edinburgh. And then he married. A lot of people didn't know that Howard had married, but he did. And he had already started the Ceilidh, and he started it in Pittsburgh. And he started it because two fellas who sang nothing but Australian songs, you know, sort of outback songs, wonderful. Oh, they were the greatest guys. With Howard Glasser, he then worked at URI, where I met Kenny Goldstein because he knew Kenny, you see, by that time. And Kenny Goldstein in University of Folkloric Department, he knew Hamish Henderson, my friend in Edinburgh. Do you understand?
Yeah.
There are all of these
connections.
All these connections. And I knew Hamish through Cecil Newman in Belfast, and can still remember that Hamish Henderson, who speaks Gaelic, Italian, German, like a native, and he taught us an Italian song. Gesù capuzzo per questa via, l'ama passata la fanteria, sending in the area, Secunga il motore, questa la bella vita de noi aviator, questa la bella vita de noi aviator. I don't know what any of that means. It's something to do with the Air Force.
Yeah.
And Hamish taught us that. I learned that when I was 16. And that, of course, was learned, that knowing no Italian, but we learned it, you know.
You learn the sounds and you can sing the song.
Because we got the sound, you get the song. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know I'd get serenaded when I came here, Maggie. Thank you so much.
Well, there you go.
Is there anything else you want to talk about? We do have a few minutes.
Well, I think that I should mention that Jody Heck took over when I left. I left it on the 20th anniversary and stood up and I said, this is your place. You have to work out whether you want to close it, whether you want to continue it, whether you want someone different to take it over. But I really think get together and talk it over. It would be lovely if somebody from Tryworks would do it. And a committee did take place, and there was a lot of I think bad feeling about A, my leaving, B, some people wanted it one way, some people wanted another, and some people were lost through more than likely quarrelling, arguing, etc. But Jody Heck took it over and she ran it, but Jody ran it with the open mic still, but she really ran it also as a concert giving, and she hired people to run it like a concert series. She ran it very differently from I ran it. But it didn't matter. It continued to run for 15 more years. So it ran for 35 years as a coffee house. And of course, some people say, you know, that it should be started. I said, no, it was the right time for folk music. See what the need is.
Yeah.
The need at that time was for folk music. You have to let other things. So that's how things are. And the Eisteddfod was helped by many people. Sally Jones, Colin Williams, also Ted Dawson and Jody Heck would help Howard Glasser choose people for the Eisteddfod, because he had a great ear for music, but organisation was not his strong point, but theirs were. And they helped him very much. I forget where Sally Jones is. I think she's in Canada. I think she moved to Canada and worked with folk things there. Colin still lives here. I think he's in Westport. Jody Heck died several years ago. And so it goes.
So it goes. Maggie, thank you so much. This has just been an enchanting couple of hours with you. Thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure.
To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.